Mabel Normand. As one of film's first leading ladies, Mabel charmed audiences alongside silent screen legends Charlie Chaplin and Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle. Normand had a knack for slapstick comedy, but bedrooms and bullet holes turned her life into a tragedy. In 1922, the sparkling career of 29-year-old Mabel Normand was destroyed because of shocking rumors. For the remainder of her short life, Mabel Normand was cast as the poster child for sex, drugs, and murder.
What ultimately destroyed Mabel Normand was her own flamboyance, sometimes bordering on recklessness.
On this episode of Mysteries and Scandals, we'll reveal Mabel's ill-fated role in the death of silent film director William Desmond Taylor.
The way she was implicated in the Taylor murder was almost nefarious. You had people leaking stories to the press that she was a big drug user, that William Desmond Taylor might have been her supplier.
We'll also take a look at Mabel's controversial involvement in a second scandalous shooting.
Her chauffeur is caught holding a gun, standing over a Hollywood millionaire that he had shot. Most people were fed up with her private life, her parties, and all of these scandals.
And we'll expose how Mabel's entanglement with a married man landed the notorious actress back in court and back on the front page.
Mabel felt that she had been kicked around by the media, as we would say today. And she said, well, this time I'm going to kick back.
I'm A.J. Benza. Join me as we remember the infamous film star with a talent for being in the wrong place at the wrong time, Mabel Normand. Silent screen star Mabel Normand was all alone when she died of tuberculosis at Pottinger's Sanitarium in Los Angeles. Betty Fussell wrote the biography, Mabel.
She died on February 23rd in 1930. Her real age then was 38, which sounds, from my perspective, she was very young, 38, but in terms of Hollywood, when she was forever to be 13, she was an old woman in terms of that image.
Funeral services for Mabel were held at the Church of the Good Shepherd in Beverly Hills. Honorary pallbearers included Charlie Chaplin, Fatty Arbuckle, Max Sennett, and Sam Goldwyn. Author Sidney Kirkpatrick.
Hollywood's funniest was literally in tears. And what they were crying about was the tragedy that was Mabel Normand, a brilliant, a wonderful pioneer film actress, a woman who literally lit up the screen, was torn up by a series of tragedies, one after the other, and it literally destroyed her.
Mabel's story begins on November 9, 1892, not 1895 as her gravestone suggested. Mabel Ethel Reed Normand was born on Staten Island in New York. The youngest of Claude and Mary Normand's kids, Mabel was a wild child with an adventurous spirit. William Sherman is the author of Mabel Normand, a source book to her life and films.
She was independent-minded and courageous and a bit reckless and fun and easygoing and big-hearted. She had no time for phoniness and timidity.
She was also a genuine natural-born athlete. So when she was in Staten Island, she was a champion swimmer. Her parents said that she swam to Bayonne and back daily.
Swimming the Hudson River to New Jersey certainly helped Normand's figure. In 1908, Mabel was offered a whopping 50 cents an hour to model dress patterns for a Delineator magazine.
It's not so surprising that she went into modeling. She posed for Charles Dana Gibson, who's well known for his Gibson Girl. And she did advertisements for hats, combs, shoes, and all kinds of things.
Her career was brief but intense. It was sort of the first time she got to wear pretty clothes. But it did not pay very well. Movies paid a lot more.
In 1909, Mabel was hired as an extra in a silent picture directed by the legendary D.W. Griffith.
Mabel got paid $10 for the shoot, but I mean, this would be about 5 times what she'd be paid as a model. And that first day she went home, she didn't get through filming till, I think, 11 at night, and her mother was outraged and said, don't you dare go back to the movies. You go back to modeling.
Mabel listened to her mom, that is, until a 28-year-old actor and aspiring director named Max Sennett convinced 16-year-old Normand she belonged on screen. Film historian Mark Wanamaker.
At the Biograph Company, Mac Sennett and Mabel Normand not only worked together, but got together in a very intimate way. and became boyfriend-girlfriend, you might say.
But the romance was threatened in December 1909 when Mack Sennett took off for Tinseltown.
One of the early tragedies, as far as Mabel was concerned, was that when, Mack got up and left for Hollywood, he didn't take her with him. And, she was, greatly disappointed.
Mabel turned her attention to her budding career. In 1910, Normand joined the troupe of actors at Vitagraph Studio, and within a few months, moviegoers couldn't get enough of the 17-year-old comedienne.
She just added life and vitality and energy to any situation. And of course, a lot of people have that, but in her case, the camera could record it. It transferred, it translated, and the audience picked it up.
When Mack came back from California, he had to have a star, and Mabel was right there, and I think he thought, together we're going to set this town on fire. We're going to create comedy in Hollywood.
But was Hollywood ready for Mabel Normand? When we come back, Mabel's most shocking antics on screen and off. How did a short-term drug problem invite a lifetime of chaos for Mabel Normand? And how could one good woman have so much bad luck, bad press, and bad habits? When Mabel Normand arrived in Hollywood in 1912, the 20-year-old silent film actress felt she found the promised land, and Mabel's adventurous and carefree spirit only enhanced her comedic performances. Mabel's lover, director Mack Sennett, often cast Normand as the damsel in distress in his famous film comedy series, The Keystone Cops.
So Mabel, who was not considered a bathing beauty, was doing these kinds of risque, as they say in those days, kind of comedies, showing her sexuality in some way.
She was known to have done a lot of stunts, riding horses and going up in hot air balloons, being tied to the railroad track, swimming across lakes and being dragged through the mud on a rope, all kinds of things.
In the spring of 1913, Mabel met fellow comedian Roscoe "Fatty" Arbuckle. Over the next 3 years, the duo starred in 26 films together.
For example, in Mabel's simple life, they had this natural sort of comedic sense. So these different elements combined give those films this certain special charm and fun, which is quite unique.
Mabel also had fun behind the camera at Mack Sennett's Keystone Studios.
During the time that when Mabel said, you know, you're going to let me direct, Mack gave her a little. And particularly with this newcomer, this little creepy guy off the stage who came to be known as Charlie Chaplin.
And according to Chaplin himself in his autobiography, there was a point where he as much fell in love with Mabel, but she did not return his affection in that way.
And while Chaplin was lusting for Mabel, Mabel's heart still belonged to Sennett. Composer and lyricist Jerry Herman wrote the 1974 Broadway musical, Mack and Mabel.
I wrote a song called I Won't Send Roses, which is my favorite song from Mack and Mabel. And the last line of the song is, I won't send roses, and roses suit you so. That here's a man who doesn't know how to say what he would like to say to her. And therefore, she remains a frustrated lover all their lives together. She had the affection from thousands of fans, but never from the one man that she truly loved.
Normand and Sennett planned to marry during the summer of 1915, but the wedding was called off when Mabel caught Mack in the sack with actress Mae Bush. Mack tried to make it up to Mabel.
In order to win her back, he was not only going to give her own picture and let her direct, but he built her own studio for her. This was her ticket to professional equality, and it meant a very great deal to her.
In 1916, 23-year-old Mabel took complete creative control over the feature film Mickey, but financial problems postponed the movie's release for 2 years. Normand was savvy enough to turn the delay into a publicity stunt.
There was Mickey everything, and in the store windows and so on. So when the film finally did get out, it was an enormous success, and Mickey became a hit song, one of the first hit songs out of movies.
At the peak of her popularity, 26-year-old Mabel left Keystone Studios and her lover Mack Sennett. Mabel signed with Goldwyn Pictures, and within 3 years, Normand was earning $4 grand a week. Samuel Goldwyn enjoyed the revenue from her work, but couldn't tolerate Mabel's party girl attitude.
She did have a severe drug problem. She's hollow, thin, sallow. Her eyes look drugged. Goldwyn wanted to get rid of her, in effect. Mack wanted her back, but at this point, she was being rescued by a third man, William Desmond Taylor, who got her into a drug clinic in the East and saved her life that way. Although he would help ruin it later, inadvertently, at that moment, he saved her from the drug.
In February 1922, one evening, Mabel was visiting Taylor. After being there for about an hour, Taylor escorted Mabel out to her car, and that was the last she saw of Taylor, because the next morning he was found shot, lying in a pool of blood at his bungalow.
Mabel Normand's Hollywood fortune was about to run out. Straight ahead, a dead director, a pistol-packing chauffeur, and a resentful wife. In the early 1920s, silent screen star Mabel Normand enjoyed all the perks of success. But in 1922, Mabel's fame worked against her when Hollywood director William Desmond Taylor was murdered in cold blood. Suddenly, the 29-year-old actress was caught in a web of vicious rumors.
In all honesty, I don't think the press was all that interested in the truth. This was a circus, and the greater it played, the more newspapers it sold, the happier they were. This was Hollywood Babylon at 3 cents a pop.
Mabel was the last person to see Taylor alive, besides the killer, of course. Word on the street was that the 49-year-old director was supplying Mabel with drugs.
And the sad irony, the sad truth of the matter was, Mabel Normand was being helped by William Desmond Taylor. William Desmond Taylor was helping Mabel Normand learn to read. He was a mentor. He was her guide. He was an anchor in her life.
After being thoroughly interrogated by police, Mabel Normand was not charged with Taylor's murder. The crime was never solved.
But just the mystery behind it and the scandal behind it, it caught a lot of undesirable publicity and a lot of people prying and questions about her character.
She lost her audiences very quickly. She lost some of that magic that she had. And very soon she became involved in a second scandal and another shooting, and that was the death knell.
On New Year's Day, 1924, Mabel, along with actress Edna Purviance and millionaire playboy Cortland Dines, spent the afternoon getting drunk. Mabel's chauffeur had been instructed by Mabel to take her home if she got too tipsy.
The chauffeur was trying to protect Mabel, and Mabel didn't want to go home, which you can see Mabel saying, "Oh no, I'm not going home, the party has just begun."
There was at a certain point this altercation between Dines and the chauffeur. Dines perhaps said something insulting about Mabel. The chauffeur, very defensive and protective of her, took offense at this, and he was carrying with him a pistol, and he shot Dines.
The chauffeur claimed he fired the gun at Cortland Dines in self-defense.
He wasn't killed, but again, this certainly hit the headlines, and Mabel was there. They were all hauled down to the police station. And then it turns out that the chauffeur was an ex-convict who had changed his name.
Mabel's ex-con chauffeur, Horace Greer, was acquitted of all charges, but the gun used in the shooting belonged to, guess who? Mabel Normand. Talk about starting the new year off with a bang. Once again, Mabel made the front page. It wasn't pretty.
Most people were fed up with her private life, her parties, and all of these scandals. Thus, her acting career would suffer. She was not considered anymore the innocent, loving, kind of funny, comedic girl. They looked at her with a different light.
So how many explosive scandals does it take to destroy a career in Hollywood? Apparently, the 3 strikes you're out rule applies to movie stars, too. The summer before the infamous chauffeur shooting and after the William Desmond Taylor murder, Mabel checked into Good Samaritan Hospital for an appendectomy. Now, you'd think that emergency surgery would give Mabel a reprieve from negative press. Think again.
When she comes out of the hospital, an aggravated, aggrieved wife of another patient at the hospital sues Mabel for estrangement of affection in a divorce case. This is a woman named Mrs. Church. We're back on the newspapers.
Mr. Church happened to be at Good Samaritan Hospital when Mabel was there in the summer of 1923. Mabel hardly spoke to the guy, and the charges of adultery were absolutely groundless. Still, when Mrs. Church made her claims public in the fall of 1924, 31-year-old Mabel was disgraced.
It's not just bad luck and bad timing, because she was a absolutely reckless girl. That's part of her charm. And also, people wanted her to be that reckless girl. We want that excitement and that exhilaration, but also this was still shocking, but we also wanted to be shocked. So Mabel became the first kind of scapegoat of that particular comedy girl kind.
Her career was already, heading downwards, and it began to spiral now. She had already squandered what creative talent, what energies she had were quickly being used up. She was drained.
Mabel was exhausted and depressed, but the 31-year-old actress mustered up the strength for one last battle.
There's one interesting fallout on the Mrs. Church accusation, and that is Mabel felt that she had been kicked around by the media, as we would say today, and certainly she had by the press. And she said, well, this time I'm going to kick back, and so she filed suit against Mrs. Church, a libel suit, for the first time, a libel suit.
Could Mabel save her wounded reputation, or was it already too late? Coming up, a strange marriage and a deadly disease for an unlucky screen star. In Hollywood, careers can be made if you're in the right place at the right time. And if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, you could end up like silent screen actress Mabel Normand, humiliated, miserable, and forgotten. In 1924, the 31-year-old comedienne tried to get the last laugh. Mabel filed a libel suit against the money-grubbing wife who dragged Normand's name through the mud.
It went to court, and typical Mabel fashion at this period, the bad luck Mabel, she lost the suit. And at that time, she said, to hell with it, I'm leaving town.
In 1925, 32-year-old Mabel took off for New York to star in a Broadway musical called The Little Mouse.
It did not go over very well, essentially because it was not a very good play. Mabel's voice didn't carry. It was just not a good time for this kind of career change, and she had saddled with so much else. So it was really not that surprising it didn't work out.
In the spring of 1926, 33-year-old Mabel returned to Hollywood. Movie producer and Our Gang creator Hal Roach reluctantly offered the out-of-work comedienne a 3-year film contract.
But it was too little, too late. The damage had been done. Part of it was her own character, her being so independent-minded, flamboyant, reckless in a way. But there was, people were jealous. She was powerful. And these ingredients together, just made her life and career impossible, ultimately.
Mabel's past exploits and associations frequently came back to haunt her.
One bad thing for Mabel was that every successive DA tried to work his political career by solving the William Desmond Taylor murder. And because it was not solved, the event never died, so it never died out of the newspapers.
Mabel found comfort in the company of friends and a bottle of gin. One night in the fall of 1926, Mabel embraced both when she foolishly married actor Lou Cody.
Lou Cody was, he was a drunk who sometimes appeared to act. But at one of these parties, it ended up with him on his knees proposing and Mabel accepting for a gag, and off they went to Ventura and got a judge out of bed. It was just like a movie. It was a lot of fun. They got married, they came home, and I think they both woke up and thought, oh my God, what do we do? No, we're married. And neither one of them, I think, wanted to be, but they were good sports about it, and they tried to make it work, although they each kept their own houses.
It was comfortable to be married to him at that time, and she was, searching for structure, and Lou could provide that. In many respects, it's a blessing she had him.
But the blessing Normand really needed was better health. In 1927, 34-year-old Mabel contracted pneumonia. In the hospital, she was diagnosed with tuberculosis.
She was sick for about 2 or 3 years after she really had to quit Roach. So by the time we get to 1929, January 5th, 1929, she's taken off to a sanitarium, Pottinger's Sanitarium in Pasadena. For about a year, there was this kind of everybody in the area knowing that Mabel was dying and there's nothing to do about it.
Mabel Normand drew her last breath on February 23, 1930. At the age of 38, the gifted comedienne was finally able to rest in peace.
It was like that candle in the wind, and it got blown out. You go back and you look at Mabel's films, and there was a classic talent. I mean, a real, genuine brilliance, to her work, and it stands up over time. It's as fresh and interesting and lively today, as it was back in the 20s.
Mabel was quite different in that she was this comical person, but she was quite the adorable, cute gal, but with this sort of sprite-like mischief about her.
Mabel was really one of the first comedic actresses to explore the playfulness of women. In other words, women not being shut away, but more women being more aggressive, outgoing, on their own. This was her thing. And again, she was playing herself. She was a playful, warm person, but she was reckless in some ways and took chances in a way you couldn't really separate the two.
I think she had something in her that was a little wild and crazy, and that's why she was such a good comedian. But I think she used it without any question as a mask to hide the fact that she was in pain inside.
On screen and off, Mabel Normand was spontaneous and wicked, adored and reviled. But was she a troublemaker or a magnet for misfortune? Hey, this is Hollywood, folks. Nothing's ever just black and white. I'm A.J. Benza. Join me the next time we take a stroll down the flip side of the Walk of Fame.